The man who had escaped from the asylum had a name: Victor. Victor was not always a monster. As a child, he was quiet and introverted, but otherwise a normal kid. It wasn't until he reached adolescence that things started to change. Victor had always been interested in biology, especially the human body. But as he got older, that interest turned into an obsession. He started performing experiments on small animals, dissecting them and studying their organs. Then he moved on to larger animals and eventually humans. Victor's first victim was his neighbor's cat. He lured the animal into his basement with treats and then killed it with a scalpel. Over time, his urges became stronger and he began to stalk his human victims. He would watch them for days, learning their routines and their habits. Then, when the time was right, he would strike. His first human victim was a young woman who lived down the street from him. He followed her home from work one day, and when she was unlocking her door, he attacked her from behind, dragging her inside his own home. What followed was a night of unspeakable horror. Victor tortured the woman, cutting off pieces of her flesh and performing bizarre experiments on her body. When he was done, he left her for dead, covered in blood and barely breathing. The police were baffled by the crime. There were no witnesses, no fingerprints, no DNA evidence. It seemed as though the killer had vanished into thin air. But Victor wasn't done yet. He continued to kill, each time leaving a more gruesome scene than the last. Finally, after months of investigation, the police caught a break. They found a small piece of DNA evidence at one of the crime scenes, and it led them straight to Victor's doorstep. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and torture. The trial was a media circus, with reporters and onlookers flocking to the courthouse to catch a glimpse of the mad scientist who had terrorized their city. In the end, Victor was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison. But even behind bars, his mind continued to deteriorate. He became obsessed with escape, spending hours each day plotting and planning his next move. And one day, he succeeded. Victor broke out of the asylum and disappeared into the woods, where he continued to live out his twisted fantasies. Victor moved like a shadow in the woods, silently stalking the family as they went about their camping trip. He watched as they roasted marshmallows over the campfire, giggling and chatting, completely unaware of the danger lurking nearby. As the night progressed, Victor began to mess with them psychologically. He would rustle leaves behind them, causing them to spin around in terror, but there was no one there. He whispered their names in a haunting voice, making them think they were going insane. He would occasionally throw rocks near their tent, but not hit it, making them believe they were under attack. The family grew increasingly unnerved and paranoid, and Victor reveled in their fear. He knew he had them right where he wanted them, and it was only a matter of time before he would strike. When they retired to their tent, Victor waited until they were all asleep before he made his move. He grabbed the youngest daughter, muffling her screams, and escaped into the night with her in his arms. He whisked her away to an old cabin he had been frequenting during his time on the run, tying her up to an old wooden chair. He left her there alone as Victor returned to the remaining family members to torment them once more. Victor hid inside the trunk of the family car, waiting to spring his trap once more. Once they arrived home, Victor emerged from the trunk like a nightmare. He terrorized them in their own home, playing twisted mind games and forcing them to relive his past crimes. The family was trapped, and there was no escape from Victor's sickening grip. For days, he tortured them, making them endure unspeakable horrors that left them scarred for life. And when he finally finished with them, he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a trail of death and destruction. The family would never forget the terror they experienced at the hands of Victor, the deranged psychopath who had escaped from the asylum. They knew that he could strike again at any time, and they lived the rest of their lives in fear of his return. Victor returned to the old cabin in the woods and was never seen nor heard for many long years. There he lived with his captive in darkness and secrecy.
However, after many years, the girl had finally escaped the cabin and was now out in the world, but she was not the same innocent girl that had been taken years ago. She had been molded and trained to be just like Victor, to kill without remorse or hesitation. But now, her purpose was different. She had to avenge her family.
She began by tracking down Victor, who had since disappeared from the public eye. It was a long and treacherous journey, but she was determined to find him and make him pay for what he had done. Eventually, she caught up to him in a small town in the middle of nowhere. He was living under a different name and had started a new life, but she recognized him immediately. She watched him from a distance, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when he least expected it, she attacked him with all the fury and rage that had been building up inside her for years. It was a brutal and savage fight, but in the end, she emerged victorious. She had finally avenged her family, and Victor had paid for his sins. But the girl knew that she could never go back to a normal life. She had been forever changed by the events that had transpired, and the darkness that had been implanted in her by Victor was now a permanent part of her. So she took to the road, wandering from town to town, using her skills to take down other monsters like Victor. She became a legend, a boogeyman in her own right, feared and revered by those who knew her story. But deep down, she knew that she could never truly escape the demons that had been unleashed inside her. She would forever be haunted by the memories of her past and the knowledge that she had become the very thing she had once despised.